I suggest we start, and people will be joining us along the way. Good morning. In the name of the 7 bilateral French chambers, I would like to welcome you all and to thank you for joining us today on the conference on the supply chain. In the context of coronavirus pandemic, what are the traffic restrictions in Central Europe? What are the challenges that our companies are facing in the various sectors in the supply chain and how they deal with them? What are the best practices for securing the chain are some of the questions that we shall try to answer today with the help of our guests, company representatives and institutional partners. So today we have with us, I'll start with the only institutional partner that we've got today, Julien Autré, Regional Customs Attaché from French Embassy in Serbia. Then we have Piotr Dopierala, Director of Supply Chain and Logistics in Auchan Retail in Poland. Stefan Gaibu, General Manager of the Supply Chain in Group Renault, Romania. Jakub Karamelic, our General Manager of SEMA CGM, Croatia. Karol Kolodjek, Commercial Director of Geodis, Poland. Renaud de Saint-Lagier, Regional Purchasing and Supply Chain Director in Oriental and Central European Area in Le Sabre, Czech Republic. And Georgi Sabo, General Manager of Prevost, Hungary. I have forgotten to present myself. I'm Sanja Ivanic, the General Manager of the French-Serbian Chamber of Commerce. As you have seen, we chose a female moderator in order to balance this all-male assembly. Gender equality is definitely not on today's agenda. So we will have time to take some questions as well. You can use the question and answers option, which is at the bottom of the Zoom window. So you can ask your questions and it will take time for about half an hour before the end of this webinar to answer your questions. I hope you will have many questions and we will be able to answer all of them. I would like to ask my colleague from the Polish Chamber now to launch the enregistrement of this program so that we have also the possibility to send you if you want to see it again. For the introduction, as I have previously mentioned, I would suggest that we start with you, Julien. As our regional customs attaché, you definitely had insight into what was going on at the borders at the beginning of the crisis, as well as now. So could you please give us some sort of overview of the situation?
Thank you, Sanja. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for your invitation for this webinar. My presentation will be short. So I will present myself again. My name is Julien Autré. I'm the French Customs Attaché for Southeastern Europe and Western Balkans. So it's about 10 countries. First of all, I don't know if you are aware of how French customs are organized, but we have 18 customs attachés in the world, and we cover about 90 countries altogether. And you can find all the information on our website. It's very easy to find. So in Europe, we have 5 customs attachés. We exchange a lot of information about what's going on during the crisis. And our mission is mostly cooperation between customs. But obviously, part of our job is also to help French businesses with any problem that they may have in terms of customs, economical or fiscal matters. We also work closely with our colleagues from the economical department who are present in many more countries than us. And of course, their help is priceless. I would like to thank them for their support because they always answer positively to whatever we ask. We also work with our colleagues from agricultural affairs because obviously customs are concerned with any kind of goods. And there are some specific sanitary rules which exist, and we don't necessarily know everything about legislation, so we have to ask our colleagues to help us in this matter. If we look at what happened in the region and beyond in the last couple of weeks, since the different states decided to take measures to tackle the COVID-19, this has had an impact on transport globally and in this region in particular. I think French embassies throughout the different departments I have mentioned earlier have reacted quickly by trying their best to gather information about how border crossing points were working or not in a large region from Turkey to France. With my colleagues, especially in Bucharest and Zagreb, we have exchanged a lot of information in the first few days to identify where and when problems occurred, with the help of our partners in the different countries, meaning the different administration we work with on a daily basis. So step by step, I think we've seen things were getting better, but obviously at some border crossing points in some countries, we still had problems because obviously the countries had a lack of manpower in different parts of the European Union, but also in other regions. And obviously they have decided to close down small border crossing points to concentrate on where the most people or goods were going. So that also explains why the transport was disrupted for some time. And also because at some point there were still individual crossing borders. So the police and the customs had to make some controls on how people were crossing the borders and if they were actually ill or not. So this had a negative impact on border crossing for goods and therefore for businesses. Also, each country, and especially within the EU, had decided specific rules on who or what should or could cross borders. So here again, this had an impact on how long it would take to cross borders. And also, as I said, some medical examinations were carried out, and obviously this takes time and has an impact on how long it takes to cross the border. The European Union also warned about the importance of free movement of goods, and then there were some discussions to have green corridors to help with moving from countries to countries. So I think this initiative also helped probably businesses to move their goods a bit better. In terms of activities, as far as I'm concerned, I've mainly been asked to find solutions for businesses in France who had some contracts with suppliers in other countries, mainly within the European Union, where there were some issues about the nature of goods and proof that it had nothing to do with medical stuff. We also had cases where exports were not allowed for some products for such countries. These cases took time, but with some coordinated efforts with my colleagues, we managed to find solutions. And I have to thank them for their help in this matter, because being in Serbia and having to deal with different countries is not always easy. We also had the issue of bans on French drivers imposed in Turkey, which led to a very unpleasant situation. But in the end, we managed to find a solution thanks to a good network of contacts. As a conclusion, I would say that today we hear less about problems at borders, but you will be able to tell us the situation from your point of view. So this is reassuring, but we need to remain vigilant because some countries are already thinking about lifting the lockdowns on population. This will have an impact on consumption and therefore on the movement of goods. And also if individuals are crossing the borders in the weeks to come, there will be obviously more controls, and meaning that it will take more time for police and customs to do their work. So I guess in the coming weeks, this will be the main issue for businesses because the activity will come back slowly but surely, and it will take time maybe in some countries to cross border. That's all for me. Thank you for your attention, and obviously when you have questions, I can answer them.
Okay, thank you very much, Julian. That was very informative. I would also ask you to listen very carefully now to our roundtable and to what companies say, and perhaps summarize a little bit what was said, and maybe give us some sort of instructions for the future. All right, our companies here, they have actually experience from the field. I would like to start with the question of food supplies, because obviously it appeared to be the problem number one. And I'm speaking about Serbia, but talked with my colleagues from other chambers, and they told me that the star of all food appeared to be yeast. As it seems, we all started bread baking, and the yeast was nowhere to be found. So, Honu, my question is actually for you. Yeast proved to be as valuable as gold throughout the region. So, can you tell me what Le Savre does actually in your country, and where else are you present, and how did you handle this sudden demand?
Yeah, sure. Welcome home. 200 guests. I never thought so many people will fit in my apartment. And be sure there have never been that much yeast on the B2C market. But okay, let's talk a little about Le Savre to introduce, if you don't know us. We're a family group from north of France, who is the worldwide leader in bakery yeast. We have other activities in nutrition and health. And this yeast, you know it, I would say, as a household consumer in a dry format. So we have a few factories worldwide, and it can be shipped very easily. It has a long shelf life.
Well, no, sorry to interrupt you. There is still a problem with your microphone. Can you switch it to the way it was before? We have got the same sound problem.
Yep. I can try to reduce the volume or speak. If I speak like this, it's okay?
This is a little bit better.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, I will speak more quiet. Sorry about that. So we have the fresh yeast, which is a kind of local market, and is typically in Central Europe. We have 2 factories in Hungary and Poland, who are distributing like 15 markets in Central Europe. So supply chain and logistics is really a key point. And I would say the way we lived this crisis was, I would say, first point to ensure the sourcing from China of some very specific raw materials. And when the crisis really arrived in Europe, actually we had very different behaviors depending on the markets. The craft bakers, the one that you can find in your neighborhood, were very strongly impacted. Many of them had to close. So this market really stopped quite quickly. We have industrial markets where some freezing goods were produced, and I would say the inventory was put at maximum on the industrial side. So high demand and then big slowdown. And the remark you were making on B2C, so on the household consumers, the market increased like 5 to 10 times, depending on the market. So I would say our main challenge was really to increase our capacity as much as possible. And we did it like 50% more than last year at the same period, knowing that we had at the same time the crisis and Easter being a very high period of consumption of yeast. So we did the most we could. I think the market, the competitor, they had to do the same. And it's true that many people baked more. And it's true also that some other, and there was an article in Serbia of a lady buying 6,000 bags of dry yeast in the supermarket. So I would say the real need of the market is one thing, and the consumer behavior stocking a lot in the shelves, in the fridge, is something else. So, but now I would say it's much more stabilized, and we are after Easter. So I think that we will see in the shelves, in the stores, much more yeast.
Okay, so we are definitely going to be responsible if we all grow fat, because eating so much bread all the time. Okay, perhaps a question to Auchan, because you are still in this domain of food. People have obviously started buying out of panic. So could you please tell us, Piotr, first, Auchan's activities, where exactly are you present in the region, and what happened when the crisis started?
Yes, as Auchan, we are present in several countries, so particularly it's Poland, Hungary, and Romania. Our business in Central and Eastern Europe. In Poland, we are quite a big company. We are in the top 5 of retailers, of food retailers. So actually our turnover from last year was approximately 3 billion euro. with more than 100 stores and more than 20,000 employees. And we are dealing with assortment, with a food assortment as well as a non-food assortment, and selling through the stores and as well as e-commerce, which will be quite important element, talking later about the changes which are currently going on in the market. So from our perspective, as Renaud mentioned, the first wave, it was really kind of a shock for all of us in the countries, in Poland especially, because just after announcing all the measures of the restrictions which have been taken by the government, suddenly we got really the panic on the market and really huge queues in the stores, in all of the stores actually. And it was a demand which was, few 100% more than the usual demand. So it was even much higher than the top of, I would say, the Christmas period. So actually no one was prepared for that, neither from our side, but as well from the suppliers, to react so fast for these changes. What is, let's say, from the perspective of supply chain management, is very important that we have what we face over the last time. It is really the huge fluctuations in the demand. So once we have really the huge peaks, then suddenly after a couple of days, it goes really very low, almost to zero when it's coming back. So that's really the challenge for all of us, because we as retailers are on the top of a value chain, but of course this demand which we are sensing, it's then transferred as well to the suppliers of our suppliers, and this effect is really magnifying. So it was really very difficult time, and we were trying really to somehow, let's say, cope with these fluctuations and improve as well the cooperation with our suppliers in order to give them kind of a forecast of whatever we have, to change this information, exchange the information as soon as possible, to give them some time to react. Another important part was the change in the demand structure. Because from one side, as I'm saying, over the Christmas, we could have, let's say, sales more than the Christmas, we can cope with it. But the sales has been really focused on the very limited assortment, really on the basic needs, like flour, rice, pasta, canned food, some of toiletries. So it was very narrow assortment, which was selling, let's say, or making the sales higher than the usual sales of the entire assortment. That was really very, very difficult part as well for all of us. So it was concerning the assortment. And another element as well important is that there was a change in the structure of channels, of distribution channels. Because I mentioned that the stores is one element, but once we had the restrictions over the store sales, the online channel grew rapidly. Because we have this our service of Auchan Direct, so it means delivering directly to the doors of the customers, but as well the normal e-commerce. So suddenly we are not able to cope with the demand, because demand is switched let's say, huge percent as well to online channels. So that was something what was relatively new. Now, the second part is how to cope with that. So we can call it about the supply chain responsiveness to some extent. As I mentioned, it has a really huge impact on ourselves, but as well on the suppliers and the producers. So the first element was how to cope with store replenishment, because with such a big demand, you have seen probably over all the countries, the shelves, empty shelves in the stores, all the pictures. But it was a really challenge for the entire organization, how to change the way of working, how to allocate the resources in order to cope with that and to replenish the shelves for the customers. And then as calls, once we are going further, we have to replenish somehow the distribution centers, because of course we had some stock for a couple of days, which we could, let's say, supply the stores, but then we have to take care about the supplying our distribution centers. And this part as well was causing several problems with availability from the suppliers, because the suppliers, in particular in the food business, they have limited capacities, and as well a certain lead time of the production has to be obeyed. So no one was really prepared with this scale of demand suddenly popping up. So we faced really a lot of problems with the availability of the goods from the suppliers, because simply they didn't have necessary capacity to provide these goods. So that was the second element, or third, and the next one was related to logistic market, to logistic service providers and all the situation which already Julian mentioned on the borders. Actually, in the first part, that was really the problem concerning Poland and I think neighborhood countries due to this, let's say, not known procedures and sometimes mixing of goods traffic and the personal traffic of the personal cars, which were causing some of the delays with supply. But fortunately, after, I would say, a week or maximum 2 weeks, the situation has stabilized, and nowadays we are not facing the problems. But it was once more the problem with some of the suppliers, particularly in Spain or in Italy, in the South Europe, that we were coping with the demand for the whole Europe suddenly higher. So we are not always able to get all the goods which we wanted to get. And another element which was crucial for us as a supply chain management, the broad meaning, was really to ensure the continuity of operations. So it's changed really the way how we work on a daily basis. First of all, it was a change that we start to work on the remote base, so based on the home office. So we moved a majority of us administration personnel and management personnel to work on a remote base. And then, of course, the part of the people has to work in the warehouses and our distribution centers. So for them, we have to really prepare the special procedures, how to reduce the risk of let's say, getting sick and spreading the virus potential in the distribution centers, what could be really affect the whole supply chain for us. So there was a special procedures and the precautions prepared really with details and implemented and well implemented. And what I wanted just to mention at the end, that I really, what was surprising for me, or let's say the nice surprise, it was a cooperation among the companies during this crisis. Because as I mentioned, we are retailers and we cannot do everything, but it was really good cooperation with suppliers and as well logistics service providers in order to define common procedures or common, let's say, protective measures. Because these measures has to be extended over the entire supply chain. If one party is implementing something, it will not help, it won't help. So that's why that was a quick cooperation. In Poland, it's quite a dynamic organization, ECR, Efficient Customer Response, which works with FMCG industry and as well the logistic branch. So together we have defined kind of a best practice and the common rules, how to protect ourselves, how to protect the processes, and how to operate in the safe mode. So we established, and that was, let's say, published for kind of in the written form, common procedures and the guidelines for all the participants. And that it really helped us to cope with that, and we didn't face any, I would say, significant problems so far. So it's shortly in a nutshell the situation, how we did it and what's the situation in Poland.
Okay, I think you have said 3 very important things. Number 1 is solidarity. That is what I heard first, and I think it's one of actually the lectures and the lessons that we are definitely drawing for the future. You mentioned the transport companies. I will be asking them a little bit more about it. Did you change your transport companies? Were you obliged to switch on from one to another?
Not really, but was, from our perspective, it was maybe a good coincidence because this downturn on the market has released some of the capacities in the transportation. So over this peak on our side, the transport market has really much more capacities than before. Because just give you the idea, we have been sending per day approximately 700 trucks to the stores. So we can imagine that that's a huge volume. So it's usually 3-4 times more than in the peak season. And as I mentioned, this, let's say, the situation that the transport market in some of the industries were really released because they stopped operations. We are able to cope with these volumes. So from that perspective, it went pretty smooth.
Okay.
The same, if I may add, the same was in relation to operations in the distribution centers, because together with our logistics service providers, they have as well the different customers. So they move part of the personnel from operations which had been stopped to help our operations. That's why in such a short period, we are able to increase really our capacity a few times.
Okay, all right. And last question, just out of the curiosity, are we still buying toilet paper in amounts that are unbelievable?
Not at the moment, but it was really something what everyone was asking, what is really the reason of doing it. I suppose that is kind of, story, because it has started from Hong Kong. So first of all, we learned in Hong Kong how it was done, that the people are buying the toilet paper, and then suddenly in Europe, when the crisis has started, everyone was focusing very much on the toilet paper.
A study to be done on that question, definitely. Okay, so you mentioned trucks, and we have an expert in trucks here. Georgie, you have been in road transport for a very long time. Could you please say a little bit about first what your company does, where you are present, and also perhaps what were the operational constraints at the very beginning that you had, and do these constraints persist?
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here and for the opportunity to join you. I can talk in the name of my company, Prevo Hungary, which is 400 persons size international road feeder service based company. What I mean by that is that we are providing road feeder services for major companies like Lufthansa, Air France, DHL, and KLM, and so on, doing the road part of the air cargo industry. This is our core business, but of course we have a wide portfolio with additional and complementary transportations, something like 250 trucks and a good driver's team. We have subsidiaries in Vienna, Frankfurt, Paris, and we have this east-west corridor. This is what we are specialized in. I can also talk in the name of the Hungarian road hauliers in general, as I'm the former chairman of the Hungarian Hauliers Association, or the Truckers Union, as we used to call it. Indeed, this is a very challenging period for road transportation because, of course, the demand decreased quite a lot, in particular in the automotive business. But as in Hungary, in particular, this is more or less the major customer of the truckers. The result is that most of the hauliers are at more or less 40 or 45% of their usual performance. The big players like Waberer decided to stop a huge part of their fleet. Waberer itself stopped more than 1,000 trucks, which are deposited in an airfield close to Budapest. And some more major players decided to stop at least 50 or 60 or 70% of their fleet. Of course, this is very hard to survive because even if the moratorium on the financement solutions is effective, but in Hungary there is no special aid from the state, from the part of the state concerning the wages, not like in France or in Poland or in other countries. So basically there is one solution, is to put the drivers on technical chômage. And well, that's not very interesting for the drivers because that means that they will stay with something like 200 euros wage per month in this situation. Nevertheless, as far as our company is concerned, what we experience is that with a nice portfolio with gently diversified customers, we can still survive. We just had the numbers for March, and it's not disastrous. The big question is how war will end and how is it going to restart, if it is going to restart at all. Very curious to have your opinions, gentlemen and ladies, about this. This is the big question that all the hauliers are asking right now. It seems pretty much to me that the good old days will not come back. And as we have seen, and this is a big experience with the supply chain, is that the weakest element is the haulier himself, the cheapest and the weakest. Very easy to replace, and also let's say the element that is at the end of the day the easiest to sacrifice. And the way we had a lot of transportation just for the sheer fact that transportation itself was not expensive, now it may come a situation where these kind of transportations will simply disappear. This means that a lot of capacity will not be necessary, and the way truckers in general were more or less, let's say, unhappy by being exploited. Now their reason to be unhappy will be that they will not be needed anymore. And that's a way to become, instead of exploited class, to be the useless class. But of course, we shall see all this. For the time being, the transportation society itself is sort of fair, and some special segments like ours, because we are in the air cargo business, and air cargo business is really booming since the pandemic started. We still have a chance, but the whole industry itself will certainly be reshaped after this pandemic.
Have you already started thinking a little bit about? About how you will be organized in the future? Do you think that there will be some major changes for you?
But the key to survival for us, it was to organize ourselves very precisely. And yes, I have to join Piotr, who explained how they did it with Ocean. We also implemented very strict measures and gave instructions, guided all our staff, and organized home office. Like myself, I'm in home office right now. Yeah, all these measures are mandatory, but that's not sufficient. Of course, we can do that, and then we will have to start thinking about how to decrease the capacity or how to reorganize ourselves. But for sure, we have seen it right now, and once again, I have to agree with Piotr that there is a huge surcapacity on the transportation market, which is of course interesting for the roads, for the supply chain, but it can create social problems at a given point.
Okay, we have another logistic companies here, Geodis. Carol, you have cross-country experience. Perhaps a few words on Geodis activities, in which countries you are present, and perhaps a little bit more about regulatory issues that you had.
Good morning for all of you. Once again, thank you for inviting us for this webinar. It's a pleasure to me to have possibility to speak with you. So Geodis, we are international logistic company owned by SNCF. We are representing logistic activities in SNCF. I'm responsible mainly for road transportation, but yeah, we are present in all countries in Europe, also in America, Asia. So we're global company. We have offices in around the world. And okay, the situation, I agree with Piotr. I agree also with George. That situation in the transport market, it's so first of all, it's not easy for all of logistic company, but sometimes it depends what kind of service you are servicing in what are you doing. We are represent also contract logistic services. We are doing freight forwarding service, ocean freight, air freight, and road transportation. In freight forwarding activities, the situation is quite good because now when the China market they restarted, so we even increase our volumes. We increase our demand of transport in air service and ocean. We have quite stabilized situation in the logistic in the warehouse space. Contract logistic work quite well. We don't have any problems with with demand. Our warehouses is full, and they are operated. But yeah, the biggest problem which we have now, it's mainly in the road transport, and everything it depends. What are you doing? What are your business? What you're serving in your car? I think that now the most effective industry it's automotive. In our part of Europe, automotive industries is very important. We have a lot of companies which are producing cars, or a lot of companies which are producing spare parts for the automotive industry. And now this market is totally stopped. A lot of companies they close their activities, they close plants, and as okay, for Żodis Poland, automotive is our core business, and I think 18% of our activities is automotive. And now the capacity of the market it's quite big. I can say it's big. A lot of companies they are waiting for restart of automotive industry. So why we don't have any problems with capacity? Okay, for the beginning of this situation with COVID, yeah, we have some problems in the border because we have big traffic. The borders was closed. It was not normal situation for us. But now everything it's okay. We don't have any problems with capacity. The capacity of the market it's very big, and now everybody waiting for some orders. So I think now the key of the transport companies is diversification of the clients portfolio, because yes, we have we see increase of requests in the FMCG market. We see increase of the request in the pharma market. The same with chemical companies, but the big decreases is in the automotive sectors and a little bit in the industry. So the key for the company, the key to be in the good position is to have diversification of portfolio of your clients.
Okay, thank you. Good thing that you mentioned the automotive industry, and even better that we've got one car maker here. So question for Renaud, obviously. We have seen actually car makers across Europe shutting factories. What I would like to know is whether you could maintain production. Were you obliged to do some supply chain restructuring? And I didn't ask you, how many factories actually do you have in Romania?
So hello to everyone. My name is Stefan Gaibou. I'm very happy or glad for this opportunity to share with you our professional experience together during this period, but also to take opportunity to find out how others succeed and their challenge are. So about me, I represent Renault Romania Group, but also global supply chain function for Renault Group as supply chain director. So some words about Renault. So Renault it's very present in Europe, but also globally. Across Europe, we have 34 plants, powertrain, but also assembly plants. Also in South America, we are present. Also in China, in Korea, in Russia, in Africa, and India. So if you speak about people, we have more than 180,000 people across Europe and the world, our own people. Linked to that, we have also transversal impact or influence. If you speak about suppliers, we have more than 500 suppliers across the world. So also impacting their people don't think, but it's at least 300,000 people impacted. So about us also in terms of supply chain activities, we manage activity locally in Romania, linked specific with the Romania plant. And we have three main industrial activity. We have assembly plant, powertrain plant, and logistic platform, named IALN. Revert to Renault, we have at least 34 plants in Europe, and very big impact coming from these crisis situations. So the first challenge or priority it was how to ensure late stop of the plant, so produce the maximum possible. But you are aware it was not so easy to ensure that. So you think the first problem coming from China? It's not. The first problem was coming from Italy. So just for your information, for example, our pipeline from China supply, it's about between 6 and 10 weeks. So at the short-term level, we have some level of stock to ensure continuity of production. So in Italy, it was coming big impact because we have at least three main important suppliers. They ensure they supply at least for to 5 plants in Europe. So the short period to supply, it's very impacting us. So it was the first priority to keep a quick decision and to dedicate specific task force team just to manage Italian suppliers. So to revert to about numbers in terms of logistics, we manage daily more than 4,000 equivalent trucks, for example. Also, we have service provider companies, at least to be simple, 100 carrier and also supplier logistic companies across Europe. So it was not the big problem for us, because we have at least top 10 or top 15 big partners. So ensure for us some flexibility to find at least one or two backup solution in this case. So okay, other big challenges was for supply chain specific activities is to switch to homework organization. Yeah, it was a challenge, but also it was also the test for us, because for supply chain activities, the priority was do not stop our activity, because on one hand, how to ensure late stop and continuity of production. The second was what will be strategy to build, but also have hypothesis to ensure continuity, but also how to prepare a restart after. And third main priority, it's in case of restart, what will be the dispositif to put in place to ensure the health or security of our people across Europe and in the world. So it's a very, very big priority, but also involvement of all the top management level to support this dispositif to put in place. So regard to Romania, in Romania we have three main production plant: powertrain, assembly plant, and logistic platform. We have here at least 16,000 people, and for supply chain activity dedicated, I have at least 1,500 people based in Pitești plant, but also based in Bucharest. If you speak about global function activity, so my team ensure also supply chain activity for all the Renault group across Europe. And about Pitești plant, just to have in mind, we produce annually more than 3,500,000 vehicles and also engines and gearboxes. just more than 1,400,000 vehicles per day. What was the next? So we are in the situation to restart our activity. It's already done for China and Korea. We'll start the production, sure, progressively to increase capacity, but also production level. In Europe, we just restarted this week power plant in Pitești. So gradually, at least it was more than 200 people to restart. And for coming week, we gradually increase the production level. For assembly plant, we plan to restart 4th of May. So will be also progressive restart. And also, if you speak about Europe, we just restart in Flaine plant in France. Just for we produce Zoe and Clio. So we restart. So for the both plants, the big priority is to ensure security, healthy dispositif for our people. So it's a big impact for supply chain. For example, how to supply masks, equipment, and so on, linked to that, and to ensure that we have enough for at least the short and midterm period. So it was main priorities. I don't know about best practice. Sure, it was, if you go 1 year ago, we just started to apply homework principle. So it was some of pioneer activities for us, but now it's just keep right decision to switch on that, but also how to put on ensure good dispositif to have a good level decision, but also keep in touch with all our service providers, but also suppliers, for example. So that's it. Just in a few words about Renault.
Okay, thank you. Right, we lost for a second Jakob. Jakob, can you hear us now?
I can hear you. Unfortunately, I have some problem with the internet connection, but I can hear you.
Okay, perhaps now without the video it would be fine. Because we haven't spoken about the maritime transport just yet. Could you tell us a little bit about what are the ports actually that you are using to supply Central European market? What were the major issues that you had? And also, since we haven't spoken about that just yet, perhaps the question of medical supplies, because medical supplies became the priority #1. And tell us a little bit about, did you handle a lot of medical supplies, how much time it takes to transport these type of goods, etc.?
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation to participate on this webinar. So CMA CGM is having liner container services from Asia to Adriatic, and in the area we are calling Rijeka, Koper, Trieste, and Venice. So from Koper particularly, and mostly we are supplying Central European countries. Through port of Rijeka, mainly we supply Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Serbia, and to some extent Hungary as well. So I can say that all the times we had regularity in our liner container services. That means every week we had vessels from Asia coming to our area, and we don't have any disruption in terms of our services. Of course, that traffic is lower. Of course, that we had to restructure a lot our services, but in terms of supply chain, in terms of regularity of our services, we have been offered liner container services without any disruption. So all the times, maritime transports run smoothly. and also the traffic in the ports took place without any interruption. So shipments by rail and by trucks went smoothly from the port. Yes, at the very beginning of this pandemic, there were certain deadlocks at the borders, mostly for truck transport, but I do believe that there was never a supply chain deadlock for some longer period of time. On the very beginning, also, we've been concerned that our ships were coming from the Italian ports to Rijeka and Koper, so from the infected area, and we've been concerned about smooth operations, but really on the level of port community, we agreed to carry out all formalities requiring contacts with the ships. So seafarers were not allowed to go ashore. We limited also contact of our staff of customs, immigration, police, harbor master with the ships, but all procedures were run smoothly without any disruptions. So you asked for the supply of medical staff. I mean, if they were loaded in containers, as I told, we dispatched all containers on time from the port, and in agreed transit time that containers with the goods arrived to the final destinations in Central European countries, but also in the Southeast European countries as well.
Okay, right. Thank you. I would have one question for you, Hanu, now, but it would be also the question for all of you. Do you think that we should broaden now our supplier choices or do more local or near shore sourcing? What do you think?
Me better, or maybe I should switch off the video?
Try to switch off the video because the sound is still not that good.
Okay, definitely it's something that we have to take into account. The local suppliers, we know that in our purchasing policy, typically now we had like potentially 2 packaging suppliers coming from Padova in Italy, 10 kilometers from each other. So it's true, it's double sourcing, but nevertheless, there's a local risk that we didn't take into account. So yes, the strategy of sourcing will be clearly impacted. And the same about logistic carriers. Somehow we see that when we have a very strong and a big part of our business with one carrier, ensure enough business to him, so maybe he will live better this crisis. So we will have definitely to take this crisis into account. And it's true that within the staff we have different type of regional organization of supply chain, and definitely we will debrief the way we are organized, the responsibility, local, regional, from this crisis, definitely. The same way, actually, we have to review, I would say, our different backup plans. I didn't say that during the crisis to bring as much cheese as possible on the market. We had to activate a new flow actually from Serbia, to increase the flow from Turkey, also from Russia. So there are flows that were not so usual, but that we had to activate fast, talking about packaging issues as well with different regulations. So yes, it's good to be prepared. In that crisis, we had to be very agile and to adapt to any situation we met. We heard about borders crossing. I know that at some point the border crossing with Hungary was a real issue, with individuals that were stopped the traffic to be sure to be able to go home, like a Romanian and Bulgarian. So yes, plenty of things to take into account to get prepared.
Thank you. Perhaps somebody else would like to comment. Actually, I have read somewhere that 81% of companies rely on Chinese suppliers. So my thoughts are we going to see massive restructuring of supply chains? What do you think? Somebody, a volunteer.
If I can, from lots of perspective, we have only few Chinese suppliers, but it's more linked with the chemistry industry, the chemical industry. As long as all our historical chemical suppliers move their production to China, we are dependent on them. So they might, these suppliers, change little their strategy. But typically, for some raw materials, only few of them, we don't have much choice. They are coming from different industrial companies, but they all produce there.
Okay, thank you. I have another question, perhaps for Georgie, and let's say I will ask the same question. So Georgie and Yakov and Karol, actually, our logistics companies. It's widely known that trade and logistics generally are very paper-based processes. And I would be interested in knowing whether are we digitizing supply chain processes? Do you think that digitization and making data available through digital means would improve supply chain processes and perhaps help us act more faster and better?
I start. May I be the first to answer?
Mm-hmm.
Well, indeed, there is a lot of room for improvement in road transportation, and mainly in data sharing and data processing and transforming the whole business into something more intelligent, more smart. But till now, there was no real need for such a development. What we have observed is that our customers, freight forwarders and huge multinational companies, were more interested in keeping the hauliers at easily replaceable, mediocre level of intelligence, and not to depend on them. I think there is a possibility a change coming from this point of view. This crisis, or let's call it this pandemic, may bring such a changement. Indeed, it would be much more intelligent to drive as little as possible, to avoid useless empty kilometers, empty spaces in the trucks, and even to move cargo when it's not needed. Or if we move it, then why not move it at the right time and with a lot of synergies that can be found among the different players of the supply chain market. We are looking forward to it, and me personally, I do believe in a lot of development in this particular area.
Yakov, you also wanted to comment. You sent a message.
Yes, so you asked about digitalization of the supply chain. So from our point of view, this crisis gave us extremely good chance to develop a digitalization of our whole business processes. So in this period of time, 90% of our staff were working smoothly from home. Also, majority of the freight forwarders in our area also were working from home, what is enough proof that we are using all benefits of digitalization. So we are developing also paperless bill of lading, which is the crucial transport document in our business. We've been also supplied our customers with the blank copies of the bill of ladings, and they were able to print that at their home or offices without coming to the agency. So I believe that this crisis gave us a good chance to develop digitalization to the maximum extent, and this is positive aspect of this crisis. You also asked previously about the China, so I could confirm that China is the origin of the container shipping worldwide, and it's very, very significant for our region as well. According to the information from China, in the first 3 months, they experienced around 9% drop in their port traffic. And for sure, that will be reflected in the drop in the world container traffic as well, also for our area. But the most important is that maritime transport runs smoothly, and we are at the service to our customers without interrupted liner weekly container services to our ports.
Karol, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, I agree with my colleagues. We can say that nothing will be the same as before the COVID-19. So especially in the transport processes, also our forwarders, all of them, they work from the home. We forgot about the paperwork. All information is sent by emails. All even information about transit time and confirmation of CMR, confirmation of request, everything. It's confirmed by scan. Everything is confirmed by TMS. So now we see that without paper we can work. Without standard paper, standard request or CMR, it's still possible to work, to confirm the transport, to confirm the orders. So I think now we see that yes, we can say we can work without paper, and digitalization is also the key to change all logistic processes, especially in the road transport.
Okay, thank you. I have got another question, because before we go on to questions from the audience, perhaps to our companies Auchan, Renault and Le Safre. I would be interested in knowing, did your supply chain risk management processes change? And also, did you do beforehand or during the crisis, or are planning to do supply network mapping? Because I believe supply network mapping is one of the risk mitigation strategies. You need to know which suppliers, sites, parts, products are at risk, and which allows you to put yourself in first line to secure inventory and capacity at different sites.
Yes, maybe I will start from this perspective, because it's one of the crucial points, especially for now. So these procedures before already existed, but now we can really fully understand why it's so important, and for sure this importance will grow. So as you mentioned, we have a few initiatives along that. So one is the substitution of assortment and as well the suppliers. So it means making, let's say, daily almost analysis of the situation with every supplier. We have regular meetings, and we are taking the decisions how to switch the assortment, how to switch the suppliers. And of course, this risk or specific risk categories, specific risk regions are as well taken into consideration in making the plans and making the decision from where we are going to source in the near future. So this is a very important element. And the second element, which is related to risk, these are all the safety procedures, because for all of us, the crucial, let's say, the most important element was to really protect from one side the customers in our stores, from our side the personnel, and as well the personnel from our partners who are working with us. So all the procedures related to sanitary regulations, to procedures as well of exchanging the documents. Because I can only confirm what colleagues just said. We made it as a kind of a best practice, or really impose already now the paperless operations. So all the trucks which are coming and all the delivery documents has to be scanned and send an electronic form, or is EDI, that's the best solution. If not, then it's, let's say, scanned versions. So that has been already imposed. And I suppose it will develop, because of course we are learning still how to do it and how to respond. We are learning on our mistakes and the things which works. But for sure it will be one of crucial learnings out of the situation for supply chain management, how to really ensure the continuity of supply, continuity of operations in such a difficult periods.
Stefan, you wanted to comment as well?
Yes, some words from me. So linked related to risk management. Just for us, it's from my perspective. It's not to review, but to reinforce. Really speaking, for us is the huge and real test of our dispositive of risk management in supply chain. So the result is very positive and recognized by the top level management in Renault. So also is the big opportunity to enrich and to reinforce our risk management of that. Secondly, about network design or about suppliers, it's not because of this crisis we keep in the account this review of network suppliers. It's our own and specific heart of our activity to ensure we are recognized supply chain in Renault like cost killer. So logistic cost, it's important part of our turnover, but also our priority in terms of cost. So we are at the heart of this activity. So for us, just maybe it's the big opportunity to go further, to go faster in this review of the supplier network. So it was our priority from the past. We continue on that, and this period or after this crisis will be just positive reinvest for forces in these activities to go faster and further.
Renaud, perhaps you might want to comment.
So thank you. So I would say that like every industrial company, we had risk management, risk mapping. But I would say that nothing is as good as such a situation to really realize that when purchasing departments are pushing to diversify suppliers, to have double suppliers or more, sometimes creating another cost to manage this risk, then it shows what is the added value of it. And so I would say definitely the return of experience, the comparison benchmark of the situation between the different factories will be managed. I expect we will always learn something from it. And we'll see if that helps us reviewing our strategy, but I'm quite confident on this. It's it's a topic that we already identified, the risk to be too much dependent on one or few suppliers.
Okay, thank you. We have got, let's say, 15-20 minutes to answer some questions. So before asking in the end, Julien, to summarize what we have said, let's try to answer some of the questions. I see here a question for Jakov from CMA CGM. How do you see future of container transportation from Asia? And do you expect any decrease of business or business as usual?
Thank you for this question. As I told, China is origin of container shipping worldwide, and drop in the port traffic in China, which is already occurred, will reflect also to the world container traffic, for sure. So all shipping lines, including CMA CGM, is doing already a lot of restructuring and in terms of capacity management. But the most important for our customers is regularity of our services. So despite the so-called blank sailings or something like that, this is our internal capacity management, but we are finding ways to maintain regularity of arrival, departures and arrivals in the ports in our area. So I could expect drop of traffic, but we as shipping lines, we are simply carrying the goods what buyers and sellers agreed between themselves. So we depend on their business. We are simply affecting the transport, sea transport, overseas transport. We depend on the business which are between buyers and sellers.
Okay, thanks. Two questions for Auchan. Piotr, I think you have seen it as well. Knowing that most of your warehouses and transport are subcontracted, how do you financially compensate new sanitary measures, productivity and cost for products, gloves, gel, and masks? And also, does Auchan supply chain is based on country basis or at CE level? And do you see useful regional approach of the supply chain? I think you partly answered this question already.
So just shortly, considering the cost, this cost are somehow split between us and logistics service providers, because everyone is, let's say, is providing with the staff of their own employees. So we are defining together the measures. What we are helping to all of our partners is to ensure the supply of masks and as well with all these materials which are related to that, because we are buying it in big quantities as well because of the stores. So of course we can provide, and we are providing it for all of our partners, so I mean warehouse operators and as well the transport companies. So that's how we do, but the costs are split here based on the demand and based on agreed measures. Concerning the cooperation, regional cooperation and international cooperation, it exists, but what's going on in the recent years in the retail, particularly in the food retail, it becomes really localized. So more and more we have the tendency to have a local supply. So that's as well the reason why we are taking into account and defining all the measures how to cope with a higher number of suppliers, with the smaller suppliers, how to help them, how to organize themselves. And from our side, as one was asking, this international supplies as well for the goods which we can share, so particularly for our own brands, when you can bundle the volume and get some synergies from the production in different countries. So this exists, and I suppose will exist. So it's not really changing. It's not really changing the structure itself. It's rather what I mentioned before, rather to prepare the procedures, how we can secure the continuity of the supply. So making the suppliers mapping, making kind of alternative ways how to do it, how to source the products. Because that's to some extent the challenge. So we have to be prepared, and we have to be much more agile from the supply chain perspective in order to switch quickly based on the situation from supplier to supplier or from location to location. So I would rather see it from this way. So directly, it's not changing the structure itself. It's, let's say, the general trend is to focus on the regional supply. From our side, it's one of the measures which are taken out of the crisis. It's that we have to significantly increase the flexibility in supply chain.
Okay, thank you. I have another question. How would you say that this crisis changed your organization, mindset, and culture? Perhaps, Renaud?
Yes. Actually, I think there was two points on the question. One was about the supply chain organization. I would say that first of all, what we are very much wondering is what will be the market tomorrow. Typically, the trend on household baking will it remain so high. It is likely that people realize how fun it is to bake at home together in the family. Therefore, we'll have to probably adapt our capacities and flows and so on. And also, we can wonder how the smaller, maybe actors, both on the supplier, small carriers, and the customer, which are the craft bakers, what will be their situation after the crisis? Some of them might have to close definitely, stop the activity. So definitely we'll have to adapt to that. That's the first thing. Second thing, regarding the mindset, okay, we were, like probably many companies, already using web conferences and so on, but during the crisis, we had only that. And I think that the way we worked in home with web conferences, probably some of it will remain. And I expect we will maybe travel less than in the past. And this plus what we heard about local suppliers, maybe local logistic, I think all of it will impact positively also our environment. I hope so.
Okay, what else have I seen? Piotr, what are the expectations for Q3 and 4 of this year in terms of budget of transport costs, considering the smaller transport providers, subcontractors may not survive crisis, so the offer and the supply can be lower, but also the demand for transport from some industries, oil price is going down, etc. So what are the price expectations for the 3rd and 4th quarter?
This is quite a complex question, because from one side we are talking about the demand in general. So here we don't have a crystal ball, because no one knows how long it will last and what will be the impact on the customers and the way how we are buying. But what we observe so far, but there is already a change, because the people are buying more consciously. So generally the turnover in the retail, it's not really higher than it was before. It has changed its structure, which of course is translated directly to the transport capacities. From our side, this emerging online channel is creating a huge demand on the distribution. So this last mile transportation, especially for the smaller companies, for the companies who delivers directly to their customers, that market is growing and is even overloaded. I don't know the situation in all the countries, but in Poland certainly. So even some of the companies which were not dealing with this kind of services before, they are now getting in and or supporting the big companies like DHL, UPS or whoever, but they're as well supporting us and the companies who doesn't have enough capacities in order to provide these deliveries. So as I'm saying, it's hard to predict. Everything will really depend how long this crisis will last and what will be the long-term impact on the customer behavior. But for sure, what I can say, I see more of the demand for this distribution transportations coming from the online development, and as well as special services concerning transportation from the smaller suppliers, maybe the smaller volumes, but more frequent. So that's what I see from the perspective of food retail in general.
Okay, thank you. I have 2 questions for Renaud. Stefan, what is your best estimation for car production for May, June and the 2nd semester? And also for you, how the tax measures of the authorities help the group? What is the impact on VAT and on corporate income tax? And are there changes in transfer pricing policy because of changes in supply chain?
So first of all, a good question. We just posted our results from the 1st semester. Just for information, the vehicle production it's down between 24–25% in a global market. It's down by 24.6%. So the impact from March and April production, I think it's not only for us but for all auto industry, at least in Europe. So due to this pandemic period, the group suspended its 2020 guidance in March. So to date, the impact that this pandemic will have on the group's results is still impossible to assess from my perspective. So group will communicate a new guidance as soon as possible. Let's consider that it is in a position to do so. So we just focus on restarting production activity, and sure, in parallel, we have to announce in May some optimization of our cost, but also organization. And linked to that will be also specific communication and guidance as soon as possible for the next period for this year. So about the second part of question about tax, I think. Just to try to find the question.
I will repeat it to you. Just a second. How the tax measures of the authorities help the group? What is the impact on VAT and on corporate income tax? And are there changes in transfer pricing because of changes in supply chain?
Yeah, for things related to tax and so on, it's not in my specific expertise, sure. I'll try to not improvise this question, but maybe linked about price in specific services and transport on logistic supply chain. Sure that the focus will be not to use the price if I speak about our career panels, but because it's also so hard for him, and we try to have very close discussion and analysis with our partners on the logistics services, and to find the best solution for both parts. Sure to not increase the price, but to maintain on the survival level at least, but also related to this situation, we can suspend some specific on standard organization of, for example, for transport flows and so on, with huge impact on cost, on logistic cost, and to build specific organization, or for example, specific transport plan for limited period, just to save or to have a good level of cost, also to permit to survive for our partners, but also for us, and to keep some reserve of time to build what will be after the mid level of time.
Okay, thank you. We have one question for transporters. Any of you can answer, so however you feel for answering. No one is clairvoyant, but what are your feelings on medium term about financial condition of transport companies? Potentially, we have several, sometimes contradicting factors which should be taken into account. First, before COVID period, large deficit of drivers across Europe. Second, some industries were largely decreased transported volumes, which will probably lead to bankruptcies of transport companies. And third, passenger transportation can go down for unknown time, potential conversion of bus drivers to truck drivers. So perhaps Geodis or...
Yeah, so I can start. So as told Piotr, unfortunately we don't have it in a crystal ball, but yeah, the situation in the transport market, it's not easy now. We know that in the beginning of the year, the capacity of the market it was very low. Yes, we have all transport companies in the Europe have problems with the drivers. How the situation will change now? So I don't know now, because yes, probably some of the companies, if they work only in some special sectors, for example, companies work only for automotive industry, they probably have big problems now. But in the other hand, a lot of companies, they try to find some solution. They try to work, for example, with FMCG, because now they have big demand of the orders. Some of the companies they try to fight in the sport market. We have now a lot of orders, a lot of questions in the sport market. And some companies they change this process and start to ask companies in the sport market. So I know that we still have some possibilities to find to diversification our portfolio, but it's not easy, and probably the situation after COVID will change. And okay, for sure, the capacity now it's much better, the capacity of the transport market, but we don't know what happened with big carriers, what happened with big transportation companies. We see now we receive some message, for example, from Hungary about big truck companies. The same for the Baltic countries market. That the companies, they have now some problems with the drivers, with the trucks. Probably they will they have to decrease the park of the trucks. So, but we'll see how is when we restart, especially for the Poland, when automotive will restart this production.
George, perhaps a sentence or two.
Yes, indeed, I would like to quote Winston Churchill, who said, like, never let a good crisis go to waste. This is probably the right opportunity to restructure, to reorganize, redefine the whole business. And yeah, one of the first solutions that we see is driver shortage has disappeared from one day to the other. The wage expectancies and availability and all that huge problem that we were dealing with for years now simply disappeared. I'm not sure it will last, but in such times of crisis, or as Mr. Macron says, in times of war, a lot of new things can pop up. And why not self-driving trucks and alternative energy source-based trucks can come in and reshape the whole activity. I'm believing more and more that we will end this year with revolutionary or unexpected solutions in this perspective.
Okay,
of course, for those who will survive, which is a big question, how many of us and in what percentage. But those who are well organized, have a good customer portfolio, and took the right decisions at the right time, they will be probably here, or we will be probably here to experience this beautiful new world that is expecting us after the crisis.
Thank you. I'm keeping the last two questions for Julien. One last questions, actually it's 5 questions that I will try to squeeze into one, but we have already spoken about digitization. There is any of you can answer who feels like it. How technology could help you apply sanitary measures or good traceability? Are you exploring to use blockchain, beacon, or RFID to avoid direct contact between people? For example, crossing a border with a truck. Are EU customs working on digital solution as it has been done with the digital border between Calais, Dunkirk, and Dover for the Brexit? Anybody?
I can give you my input on that. Just a few words about digitalization. Sure, digitalization project, globally speaking, for supply chain, no, it's not from today. It's from some years ago and more. Just in this period, we will go faster, go deeper, but also try to discover what will be the next priority and the challenges on digitalization. Because if you speak about blockchain, IoT, RFID, and so on, personally speaking, for me, it's on the past from now. So will be what if you put in place IoT, RFID, other things. What will be the way to discover with this? Because these things is today, it's yesterday, it's not tomorrow. So the first thing. The second, what will be the speed we put in place just to keep in touch, very close day by day management. And how I give you an example. 2 years ago, for example, we had also organization to have each month's results after 1 week after the month. So now we are very different organization, each week, end of the week, we have the view of the last week, what is the situation and what will be the quick reaction and action to put in place for the next week, just to avoid disruption, just to avoid unusual cost and so on. So they change very quick, digitalization. And from our perspective, to handle with this, yes, we had a lot of talk, named proof of concept, proof of value in the different area. If you speak about production, logistics, and so on. Sure, you are aware about concept industry 4.0. So Renault, it's very involved and in this concept. And also we have at least two plants, I think in Brazil, but also in Europe. It's recognized at the global level with this concept of, sure, of digitalization, but also linked with the industry 4.0. That's it for me.
That's maybe a short comment from my side as well, because I think the technology is one element, but the second element is really how to ensure the kind of a mass implementation. Because concerning the technology, we have already the standards like electronic data interchange. It's only the matter that we are not really speaking the same language, all of us. So the matter of, let's say, standardization of information exchange over all the industries, carriers, and all the systems, that is something what is really absolutely necessary, because the tools, I would say, we have. It's only the matter how we are going to cooperate together in order to enforce these standards and implement them in a much broader scale. And that is already something what can be relatively quickly done. It's rather the matter of, let's say, all of us to agree to the standards and as well adjust our internal procedures and the systems to do it. And that, from my opinion, could help really, really fast.
Okay, thank you. For Julien now, we have two questions. Julien, so if you could answer them, I will read them. And also perhaps you could, as we have said in the beginning, summarize a little bit our today's talk. Say whether you think that we are facing the crisis with success, and perhaps are we ready for a future crisis? Did we have any lessons that we learned from here? So questions that we received is related with the customs. It's does the custom oversee manage to have simplified procedures for merchandise to cross the border? And also we see that many countries imposed ban on export for some products, especially mass and hydroalcoholic gels. This is a question from L'Oréal. We have warehouses for whole region based in Croatia and Bulgaria, and any ban of export from those two countries affects supply of whole region. Are you familiar with some experiences where such exports were allowed, and under which conditions?
Thank you for the questions. Regarding, and going back to what was discussed before, I think French customs especially, we have developed a lot of exchange of information with operators to avoid too much paper. French customs is working to develop apps or for our daily jobs to use all the systems and all the procedures we have and to avoid paper. But it's not easy, because if we take the example of the smart border between the UK and France, in some cases we cannot avoid paper. So I think it will take time before we get rid of papers for everything. And especially like Piotr said, I think systems have to communicate with each other. So it depends on the language. But yeah, French customs is looking at ways to also use artificial intelligence and stuff like that to improve our systems, our controls, and how to communicate with the businesses. Regarding bans on export, I don't have the answer to that. Obviously, the situation is the European Union, but also the countries do not want to export certain goods because we need them in the different countries. So if they could send me an email with the specific situation, then I can see with Paris what is exactly the situation now, because I'm not an expert in this field. So they can send me an email and I will look into it and ask my colleagues in Paris to give me an answer about this specific situation. We had one case in Romania where for specific goods, nothing related to medical stuff, but there was a ban. And with the coordinated efforts of my colleague from agriculture, also the economical service, we managed to discuss with our different partners within the administration. And in the end, the ban was lifted and the companies impacted had the opportunity to export their goods. So I think it's also a matter of how we discuss. But I think for all the medical staff, it's not because of the different legislation put in place by the different countries, but it's the European Union, which has also decided some rules about exports of certain goods. So they can send me an email and I will look into it. So I will try to summarize everything that was said today. So obviously the beginning of the crisis created some shock, some panic, and some high demands regarding certain goods. Obviously, this situation had an impact on transport, and this also has, for companies, they had to maybe reorganize. They also had to put in place specific measures for workers in order to avoid spreading coronavirus, but also to ensure that businesses would still be able to work. I noted that automotive companies obviously had a real big impact on transport within the European territory, not just the European Union, but the territory as a whole. And also because China obviously is a big supplier for a lot of companies. This had an impact because their country was in lockdown and they could not supply for some businesses. I also noted that road transport was more impacted than maritime transport, air transport, because there were still regular shipments of goods by containers, even though in terms of goods there were less exports from China. Also, I could see that most businesses are thinking of what's going to happen next, but it's difficult for them to foresee what will be the situation. Obviously, the impact on transport companies, especially road transport companies, will have probably some developments in the near future, but it's difficult to decide and to exactly say when it's going to happen. But most people also said that they had to adapt to the situation in different ways for their day-to-day job, basically, because people had to work from home. So most exchanges of information were not done by paper, but through emails or digitized documents. Some said that they would also think about sourcing and how they will organize that in the future to adapt to this kind of situation if it had to happen again. And obviously, this will have an impact on transport, generally speaking. I think for most businesses, if not all businesses, the analysis of the supply chain to ensure continuity is a key point for the future, but also to make sure that at the same time, workers and consumers are protected to avoid this crisis to go on. Someone said that maybe there will be less travel in the future and people will use a bit more this kind of exchange through webinars or some remote exchange, and this may have also an impact on pollution. And I think the conclusion for all this is that this crisis nobody could foresee. The end nobody can foresee, but the adaptability is the key to everybody's business. It's obviously the case for businesses, but it's also the case for administrations and institutions, because at least for French customs, our aim is to help businesses to make sure that they are able to do their job, to respect legislation, but we are not here to stop them from transporting goods from one point to their final destination. So obviously there are bad impacts of this crisis, but we can see some good impacts in terms of reorganization and how businesses will adapt to this crisis.
Okay, thank you very much for that optimism at the end. I also believe that we are now equipped to deal with pretty much any crisis because all the important words were noticed. I believe it was digitization, it was solidarity, etc., etc. Sorry if we didn't have time to answer all your questions. We already overlapped by 15 minutes. So, dear colleagues, dear participants, that would be all for today. Thank you all. If you have any further questions, do not hesitate to contact your chamber. Tell us how we can help you. And now this is going to sound like the Eurovision Song Contest, but I've always wanted to say this. Goodbye from Belgrade, Bratislava, Bucharest, Budapest, Prague, Warsaw, and Zagreb. See you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care.